What is up, CG Tits? My name's Eric Schilling. Today we're going to create a little cereal bowl scene. We're going to make the fluid with RealFlow 4 and some rigid body simulations also with RealFlow. And we're going to render out a 3D package. I'm going to use 3ds Max today, 2008. Let's preview what we're making. Go ahead and play this. Okay, looks pretty good. We're also going to learn a little bit about V-Ray. V-Ray is the rendering software. We're going to make the materials for the milk and the cereal and the bowl. First things first, let's go ahead and create a project folder on the desktop. I called it cereal. We're going to save everything into this so we can keep organized. I'm using 3D Max, like I said, but you can use any compatible program with RealFlow, so that's going to be my Cinema 4D, Houdini, but not Blender. Blender's not supported by RealFlow. That being said, let's go ahead and create a bowl and some cereal particles for our animation. I just have a standard scene here, nothing new. My units are inches. I'm using 1/8 of an inch units, so go ahead and to make this bowl we were looking at here, I'm going to go ahead and make a sphere and just cut it in half, give it a face extrude, and then turbo smooth it. And then these particles are actually going to start out above the bowl, like right about here. And you can do this in any program that's compatible with RealFlow. I'm going to go ahead and use 3D Max. That being said, let's just hop right into it. Create sphere. Doesn't really matter the size. I think 6-inch diameter might be pretty good. Just throw it by the origin. You're going to want to stand this straight up too. So it's right on the origin right there. Looks good. I'm going to make this a relaxed tutorial too, guys, so don't worry. I'll go through all these buttons that I'm clicking. I'm going to rotate it up. I'll hit the rotate. Change that X to 0. Boom. Okay. Now let's cut that top off. How should we do this? I'll convert to editable mesh. Right click, convert to editable mesh. Under selection, I'm going to go ahead and hit polygon. So I can select each face. But I'm just going to click, drag, select all these top faces here on the top of it, and just boom, delete it. Ready? Deleted. Okay. The bowl's not looking bad, but let's go ahead and add some depth to it with a face extrude. First, before you can do that, let's select it. Okay, good. Face extrude. The amount doesn't matter. Just eyeball it, whatever you think looks good. Right here looks good. I'll go with 0.78. That looks good to me. And we'll smooth it out with a nice turbo smooth. Right here under modifier list, turbo smooth. Boom. Okay. Looks good, looks good. Let's create those cereal particles. And instead of putting them inside the bowl in 3D Max, just set them on top. You'll see why in a little bit. Go ahead. I'm going to use Kick Cereal. I don't know if you guys like that, but there's a whole bunch of little balls. They're not too big. Go ahead. Sphere. How big are they? Are they that big? I'm going 3/8 of an inch. Okay. And then let's create an array instead of just copy pasting, duplicating these, cloning them. Let's just make an array of 10 of these. I'm going to be moving on the Y axis. So go ahead, Tools, Array. We want a 1D, not 3, not 2, just 1D. I'll hit Preview. Here we go. Actually, I already had made an array earlier that goes on the Y, but we don't want that. Okay, let's zero that out. I think we're going to want that X. Okay, you see when I move the X, it's just moving along that X axis, making copies. And here you go. We have 1, 2, 3. I think we have 9. No, we have 10 there. So, okay, count 10. I could change this to 20 if I wanted. And make too many, but we don't want that. We only want 10. Alright. Go ahead, okay. Quick note, if you're doing this and you want to have like a full bowl of cereal, go ahead and make a couple arrays and try and fill up this whole thing. But since we're learning, I'm just going to use 10 particles if that's cool, just so we can get less render time and just get used to what we're doing. Alright, so what do we do now? We have a lot of steps before we can get to what we're going for here. So our plan is to get these particles, these cereal particles, which are now above the bowl, inside the bowl. So we have to move on to RealFlow to do this. But before we transfer to RealFlow, we have to save this as an SD file so RealFlow can read it. and we make an SD file by using the SD file export button. And you're not going to have these on your regular 3D Macs. You have to download the RealFlow plugin, and I already did that. So if you're very new to the whole RealFlow thing, I'll show you how to install these buttons really quick. I went to customize user interface, toolbars, group, RealFlow, and then there's like these 6 buttons that I just dragged and dropped onto my toolbar. Pretty easy stuff, right? Okay. I already got these. I put 4 of them because I only needed these 4, and that was SD file import, export, export settings, and create bin mesh. I'm going to go ahead and click SD file export settings. And this is where you can kind of show what you want in the SD file. So the amount of objects in the scene. Okay, we want all these objects. We want the bowl and the particles, so entire scene. Yes. Don't worry about this. You won't need to mess with this for our scene. Time. Do you want all the frames coming over? Yes. We want 0 to 30. That's pretty obvious. Cameras, we don't have one. You could throw a camera in there if you want, but we don't have any yet, so I'll just leave that checked. Export file, this is where you can name the file. Let's go ahead and go to that serial folder we made on the desktop, and I'll call this bowl SD. Okay. Bowl SD. Okay, so it's going to save there, but now I have to export, and when I hit export, it's going to create that SD file, and the SD file is going to package all these objects, and it's going to be readable in RealFlow. So it's kind of going to be like your bridge between the 2 programs, if you want to think of it that way, because SD files communicate really well between your 3D package and RealFlow 4. Okay, let's go ahead. That's it for our 3D program. So let's go ahead and minimize that and start up RealFlow 4. Alright, so here we go. We got RealFlow up and we just made our scene. What do we do? New program. Don't know any of the buttons, right? Okay, don't be intimidated. It's really not that tough of a program. I'll go through just like a brief introduction, kind of like just get to know you session right here. You got your 4 viewports, right? Perspective, top, front, side. Easy, just like your 3D programs. Nodes, your objects are going to appear in here. They call them nodes. So you're going to have like a bowl right here is going to say like sphere 1, and then you can click that, and then these are like the parameters of that object, so you can edit the sphere 1 down here. You have your timeline right here. You can change the amount of frames by switching this number, like 100. Let's go with like 300. Yeah, let's go with 300. And let's see, simulate. That's going to simulate like all the emitters in the scene. Reset resets it back. You have some options in here. You can change if you want just the objects to simulate. Just leave the objects. If you want both, you can highlight both, and either or. Reset resets it back to frame 0. And this is your play button. You skip scene, skip frames, all that jazz. Pretty easy. Move object, rotate object, scale object, scene scale. This is going to scale the emitters to the scene. We're going to use this today. You'll see it. And this is your emitters. So this is going to be like what dumps the particles. You can choose your whatever shape you want, circle, square, sphere. You can even fill up objects with like fill objects. So if you have like a ball and you want to fill that up with liquid, just click fill object. This is your demons. These are going to add like forces to your scenes. So gravity, wind. We're going to use gravity today. You can add objects to the scene. If you didn't want to do your 3D Max thing and recreate all these objects here, you could actually do that inside a RealFlow with your create objects. I don't suggest doing that, because I think it's easier just to use the SD files. And then, constraints, don't worry about that. And new mesh, that's going to cover the particles to make like your liquid, and you can customize the mesh in RealFlow to make it look nice, and we'll go over that too. Let's go ahead and create a new scene. Go file, new project. I'll go ahead and name the project. What should we name it? Let's call it Kicks, okay? Location, let's save it to our serial folder, okay? Serial, boom, okay. Location, desktop, serial, looks good. Create new project. Now let's open up our SD file because I said it's going to act like a bridge. So let's see what happens when we open up the SD. Go to Objects, Import. You could also go to File, Import. I'll do this. Okay. Import object. Serial kicks. Okay. Here we go. We called it bowl SD. So we're going to go ahead and click bowl SD. And that looks good. We just made this in 3D Max. It should look familiar. This is now in here. Let's go ahead and minimize that. There we go. You can go. This was the nodes objects I was telling you about. So here we go, sphere 1. We could rename this if you want. I'm gonna go ahead and leave it. But just remember, sphere 1 is gonna be your bowl, and then these are all our particles. So what should we do first? I was saying that these particles, these cereal pieces, I keep calling them particles. They're not actually particles. They're just pieces of cereal. So these cereal pieces we want in the bottom of the bowl. So let's go ahead and turn these to each object, turn it to a rigid body. And we can do that by clicking the object, going down to the node parameters, which is pretty much like the object parameters. Click node. Simulation, do we want it active? Yes, we want it active. Dynamics. Dynamics, click rigid body. Okay. And see how it added that bounding box? This yellow thing is the bounding box. That's like the edge where it's going to interact with the other rigid body objects. Right now it's a box. We'll leave it like that because we can change that later. Let's go ahead and switch all these to rigid bodies. You can actually go ahead and select these all by shift clicking. So I'm going to do that. I'm click the first one. I hold down shift. I don't want to rename it right now. I'll shift click dynamics, rigid body. So they all have those little yellow bounding boxes on them. Let's go ahead. If I simulate, nothing's going to happen because we don't have a demon in the scene. Let's go ahead and add gravity. So that's the demon thing I was saying earlier. Gravity. Okay. We'll simulate and see what happens. Go ahead and click our simulate button here. It's simulating all the frames right here. You can see it by this color. That means it's simulated. Okay, nothing really happened though. You know? That's weird because we put the demon in there. We gave it a rigid body. We give every object now a rigid body. So let's see what we have to do. Okay, let's experiment. I'm going to highlight all my objects by shift clicking. Minimize my node submenu. What should we do now? Okay, let's go to the rigid body parameters in the node parameters. So we have all these highlighted. Rigid body. Okay. What options do we have? Primitive. Okay, we'll leave primitive alone for right now because as you can see, box, that's going to be your bounding box right here. We'll leave that alone. Let's turn dynamic motion to yes. Okay. Let's turn that to yes and see what happens. Okay, we see all these different options just popped up. Mass, air friction. Okay. Interesting. Let's go ahead and simulate and see what happens. Okay. Yes. Okay, we see they fall now. Alright. So, that means when you turn dynamic motion to yes, they're going to interact with the demon. That's good to know. Okay, so we really want these particles to fall into the bowl. We don't want that bowl to fall down. So I say it makes sense to turn the bowl's dynamic motion to no, right? Because we don't want that to fall. So let's try that. Let's go ahead and turn that to no. So hopefully these bowls should fall into the bowl, or just the bowl shouldn't move and these particles should fall on top of it. Let's go ahead and simulate, see if that happens. Okay, cool. Looks good because we don't want that bowl to move. We want our bowl to stand still. We just want these particles to move. I'll go ahead, stop the simulation, reset. Alright, let's tackle that whole bounding box issue because these are hitting the top of the bounding box and we want our particles to be inside of this bowl. And you change that, you change the yellow stuff, the bounding box, or the bounding force, I'm not sure exactly what it's called. We'll change that by changing the primitive, and we'll change it to mesh. There we go. It's going to act like a skin. See, now that yellow box is actually covering all of this like a skin. Okay, then we're going to change these balls. These are our serial objects. We're going to change that bounding box to a sphere because you can see it right now. It's just a cube. So select all those. Click primitive, which is just a fancy word for, you know, the bounding force right there. Change that to sphere. Boom, looks good, right? Let's simulate, and if all goes according to plan, these should go ahead and fall inside the bowl. I'm clicking and then Alt. I hold down Alt and then click, and I can move around the scene, right? And if I hold down Alt, click, and drag, in my perspective, I can like pan around the scene too. That's kind of nice to know. Okay, and I zoom in and out with the scroll wheel on my mouse. All right, let's go ahead and simulate. And hopefully these roll around. Yeah, I see there's kind of some movement there. That's good. Actually, there's one. You see how they're kind of poking through the side here? You see these balls are kind of poking through and they're not really moving that much. We have to go ahead and change this primitive right here, our bounding box, fancy word. We'll change that. Collision side, it's on the outside, so it's actually hitting like technically like this edge right here. Remember, we put that face extrude and we added some like distance between the outer edge and the inside of the bowl. We have to change the collision side to inside, you know, so we want it to hit the interior of our bowl. All right, so we want to hit the inside and not that outside. Let's reset and simulate. There you go. You see what it did? See how it's on the inside now? It's not poking out and looking all bad. That's good. Okay. Now these guys are rolling around there at the bottom of the bowl. That's sweet. We want to add a emitter to the scene, but we don't want our scene to start out with the particles, their serial pieces, on top of the bowl. We want them to already be down here at frame 0, and you have to do an initial state. You have to set initial state for the serial pieces. So let's go ahead and learn how to do that. Before you reset, I want you to go ahead and select all the pieces. Shift, click. Okay. Minimize this rigid body option here. Click down that initial state. Okay. Not many options with the initial state. There's either a yes or no question and a button that says make initial state. So let's go ahead and use initial state yes. Okay. All our serial particles selected. Make initial state. Click that button. Go ahead, reset. Actually, don't hit reset yet. Hopefully you didn't. I want to stop you here. If you reset, it's going to reset to the particles up here, and we don't want that. We want it to reset to the initial state. So you click this arrow here and select reset to initial state. Boom. Click it. You'll see a little arrow there. So it's going to reset everything to their initial states. So go ahead and reset. Boom. And see how they stay down there? Right? And that's good because I made the initial state. Looks good. I'm glad that worked. Okay. I'll actually show you what happens if you don't click the reset to initial state. So if I have this not checked, I reset. Actually, I won't do that. They'll go up to the top. Trust me on that one. Okay. Let's go ahead and create an emitter. Why not? Let's create that liquid in the scene. It's going to be these 3 little balls up here. You can choose, like I was saying, you can choose a circle, a square, a sphere, linear, triangle. I won't run through them all, but let's create like a faucet, you know what I mean? Like a little circle. So click the circle, and it drops the emitter in the scene. Now you're going to notice something, that emitter is really tiny. Like if this was a faucet, this would be like a gigantic bowl. You see how little that is compared to the, it's not even as big as like one of the kick serial particles. So instead of scaling everything down, we can use this scene scale to our advantage, and that will scale everything down compared to the emitter. So let's go ahead and do that. Before you guys do this, if you have initial states, I would get rid of the initial states really quick, because sometimes RealFlow will screw up the initial states and the serial particles will go all nuts, and like, I don't know, just trust me. Get rid of your initial states before you mess with the scene scale. So I'm going to reset my initial states here. Okay, so they're up there. I'm going to change this to 0.2. Yeah, 0.2. Yeah, so let's go ahead and see how that emitter looks. Okay. So our emitter, the thing that's going to drop the particles, is now about the size of 3 kick serial, which is like about 1 inch wide. Which is, yeah, that's fine. We'll keep it that wide. I'm going to turn this to inactive really quick, so we can make our initial states again with our serial particles. So inactive. Alright, so that's not going to emit anything when I simulate. because I turned it inactive. I have to reset our initial states. Shift click, simulate, let them dump to the bottom here. We'll fix our viewports while this does. Okay, sorry about the jump. I just had some cookies. They just got out of the oven. We're back. So yeah, the initial states are good. Scale is 0.2. The emitter, it's right here. Well, it's actually way off to the side. Let's bring that over the bowl. And this is the fun part. I like this the most. This is when we start messing with the fluid. And right off the bat, I'll just tell you, a lot of it's gonna be what you think. It's gonna be just visual, and there's some like little tricks to messing with the liquid, but a lot of it comes down to just trial and error. But I'll show you some tips and we can troubleshoot the liquid a little bit. So initial state's good. Let's go ahead and set the initial states for these particles. Make initial state. No, not reset. Reset to initial state. Reset. Okay, they're down there. Our emitter's good. We'll change our emitter back to active. From inactive to active. Okay, and just like your objects and your objects have parameters, so do your emitters and your demons. Like you could change the amount of gravity. It's not 9.8, which is fine because that's default. And your circle is going to have a whole bunch of options, and we'll mess with those in a minute. Let's simulate and see what this liquid, the liquid does. So simulate. We can see these little like grains of sand type looking things are dropping out of the emitter. Those are your particles, and they're going to interact with the serial particles. Okay, and you can see the emitter's kind of pushing these particles inside the bowl up. And I'll go ahead and do something really quick. Let's highlight all our particles here and go down to the rigid body parameters, open it up, and say the liquid isn't moving these enough, you don't feel like these are getting pushed enough, you can change the mass. I'll change the mass to like 2. So they're going to be lighter. Just like what, like a 1/7 of what it was. You might have numbers that are really, really astronomically high, but just go like 1/7 of that. And it just depends on what you did in 3D Max, like the scale of that scene. We kind of lucked out on our masses, and that's a pretty good number, 14. So I'm going to change that to 2. Let's go ahead and reset. Let's mess around kind of with the emitter, because this is where you can really make a nice looking liquid if you know what you're doing. So node, simulation active. Yes, we want an active scale. That could scale how big the emitter is right here. Like just for giggles here, I'll change that to 3. There you go. It kind of looks like an oval now. Here we go. You could rotate it. Initial state, you guys know what that is already. Particles. This is where you can customize the liquid. I'm going to go ahead and change the resolution. The resolution is the amount of particles it emits. Alright, so resolution 1, take a look at how many particles are here. If I change that to like 10 or whatever, it's going to add more. You see what I mean? We'll go with 5, okay? And I'm actually going to cut away and do like a little demonstration on these next couple options because they're really important. Okay, so here's our test scene. We have 2 emitters, same settings, same resolution, same everything, dumping liquid onto a plane at a 45-degree angle. Then we have some cubes down here just to interact a little bit with the liquid. So let's go ahead and talk about some liquid settings. Actually, particle settings. We have density, we have internal pressure, external pressure, viscosity, and surface tension. We already talked about resolution. Let's go ahead and start with density. Density is going to be the weight of the liquid. We only have 1 emitter in the scene, so we don't have to really worry about this too much. But if you have 2 emitters, density is going to be pretty important. So say emitter 1 is going to be this yellow, and then emitter 2 would have been this black. The less dense liquid is going to float on top of the liquid that's more dense. Okay, that's pretty basic, 8th grade science stuff. Let's go ahead. Internal pressure. This is important. Internal pressure is going to control the amount of explosion that the liquid has. So we'll experiment with this right now. Here are two emitters. Let's go ahead and turn the internal pressure on the one on the right down to 0.01. And we will leave the one on the left at 1. So go ahead and simulate. We have both of them selected, and you can see right away internal pressure 1 is exploding way out here. The particles are going everywhere. And internal pressure 0.01 is a little more compact. And this is going to be really important in your simulations, because if you go online, like to YouTube, and you look at people's fluid simulations, you'll get a lot of this stuff. A lot of this where the liquid's going everywhere and there's little balls flying out. And you kind of want your liquid to be more compact and realistic looking. So you can usually fix that by fixing the internal pressure. And usually when the resolution goes up, this number goes down. So resolution's at 10, this number is probably going to be 0.00 something. Something to goof around with. And external pressure I don't mess with much. Usually if I have a pressure problem in the scene, it's fixed by changing the internal pressure. Okay, so let's go ahead and have both of these liquids with an internal pressure of 0.01. So we can go ahead and now talk about the viscosity of the liquid. And that's going to be the internal drag force, which is a fancy term. Just think of it as the liquid's resistance to flow. So higher the viscosity, the more resistance to flow it's going to have. So if you dump honey onto this plane, which is a high viscosity, so it's like something like a 60, okay, and I'll change the one on the right to 60 and we'll see what's happening here. Okay, so simulate, and these are both dumping. The one right here has a viscosity of 6, so it's not spreading out too much and it's kind of staying together. And you'll really see what happens when we hit this cube. The higher the viscosity, the less it's going to want to explode out and make a cool looking reaction. So yeah, here it is. It's just kind of building up right here. It's not really doing anything interesting. And this is going to be like your honey, and this is going to be like the water liquid. So the higher viscosity, the more it's going to stay compact and kind of boring. Alright, and last one. Let's actually go ahead and change this back to 3. Which is the default for water is 3. Surface tension, that's going to be like, think of it as the attraction between the particles. So mercury, you guys remember that, where you have like the two blobs of mercury, they're going to want to be attracted to each other and create one little blob. So we'll go ahead and experiment with that. Go to the emitter on the right, turn that surface tension up to something like 100, and we'll see what happens. Okay, so now they're dumping. Let's take a look. Alright, let's stop it here. This is the normal surface tension of 0 on this emitter right here, and everyone's kind of in their own little thing. Each particle's on their own. But with the surface tension, with the attraction of 100, you can see that they group together like this. Okay, so these are your settings for your particles. Get to know them, experiment. It's all about trial and error. And yeah. We'll go back to our project now. Alright, so we're back in our project in RealFlow. Let's go ahead. I'm going to change the internal pressure of this one to 0.2. I'm going to do density alone. And I'll turn to the maximum particles, which is the amount of particles this emitter will put out. Like if I change it, right now it's at 1,000, so if it's only going to simulate 1,000 particles, and then when it hits the 1,000th particle, it's going to stop. And we want like, let's change it to like 150,000 particles. That seems like more than enough. Okay, so that's all we want in the particles little submenu. Go to circle, and this will change. You can have your speed. We'll change the speed. 2 is really good. I like 2. It's pretty good speed. So we won't change that. You can up it to you can up it faster if you want, but I wouldn't. V random. You see how these are kind of like flat little lines here coming out of the emitter, and they don't look too good. So if we throw a V random, it's gonna like put some noise in the vertical axis right here. So change that to like 1. Okay, and then reset, and you'll simulate, and these like lines won't be here. So simulate. You see how it's like a little fuzzier, and that's pretty good. I like that. Okay. So we're back. yeah, let's go ahead and simulate and see what happens, see how it looks. As you can see, we got a lot of particles here. They're going to go ahead and knock that serial around pretty good because if we change that mass to 2. Okay, but here's the next biggest thing we have to do. We have to create a mesh, which is going to be like the wrapping around these particles. And this is going to be kind of difficult to do because you have to fine tune this, and if you don't have the right mesh settings, it might look blobby or it might look too thin and too like pointy. So this is really important. Let's go ahead and add a mesh to the scene. So it's this button right here, add mesh. Okay, I added a mesh to the scene. So I can click down on this arrow right here, this plus sign, and you can see our emitter's already in there. But say your emitter wasn't inside of the mesh, you can just right click the mesh and go to insert fluids and just click your emitters and add that to the mesh. Okay, as you can see, actually that just got rid of it. So if, here we go, insert fluids, click that circle 1, okay, and it dropped it in there. Alright, so let's go ahead and reset and make some mesh settings. We want type. This is just in the node parameters right here. So as I was saying, click this. You have a whole bunch of options. Go to mesh. Build. Yes, we want it to build the mesh. Type metaballs. I don't really know a situation when you use clone object or mPolygon, so just go with metaballs. Polygon size, that's going to be the size of the mesh. So the size of the polygons in the mesh. We'll go with like 0.06. Alright, we'll go with 0.06. And we'll simulate. And there we go. So this is our mesh, this green stuff on the outside of the particles. And what do you guys think? Do you guys think 0.06 is good? I think that, we could, I'm going to go down a little bit. I'll change it to 0.03. Half the size. Reset. And you can tell the difference on the mesh. Okay. So like higher the resolution, the smaller the mesh you're going to want to have. Okay. So we have a resolution of 5 on our particles. And also depends on the size of the scene too. So let's build that mesh again, and then I'll show you kind of like a little trick to make your mesh look better. It's going to be called a mesh filter, and it's going to either relax the mesh or kind of like bring it together with some tension, and it can really make the mesh look pretty nice. Okay, here we go. As you can see, it's simulating. Let's go ahead and switch our view to smooth shading so we can see kind of what this mesh looks like. Alt click. Now you see how it's kind of like bubbly and very rounded. Say we didn't want that for our scene, which I don't think we do because it looks kind of, I don't know. I don't think it looks too great when it's that round and bubbly. Kind of looks more like a goo that you'd see on Nickelodeon, like Slime Time Live stuff. I don't know if you guys remember that. That's kind of an old reference, but yeah, it doesn't look too good. It doesn't look like milk. I'll put it that way. So click that mesh. Go to filters, filter method yes, and relaxation 0.1. Okay, let's see what happens. Go ahead, simulate. No, I don't want it to reset on 27. Fine, reset 27. See how it's all bubbly? Now this is supposed to smooth it out a little bit. You can't really tell, I guess, but yeah, it did smooth it out just a little bit. It's a little more realistic looking, I think, now. But I could change it. I'll go really dramatic and change it to like 0.4, okay? And we'll really get the exaggeration. You see how it really cuts it off, And I think we're gonna want something around a 0.05. No, we'll go with 0.1. Okay, reset, simulate. This is looking pretty good. I think our internal pressure might be a little too high because it's exploding out a little too much. But remember, this is going to be different for everyone's scene, so if you are doing this along with me, this is just going to be our troubleshooting time. I'm just showing you what I'm doing. Yeah, so see it's coming down there. It's exploding a lot, and we're getting these like holes. And actually, that doesn't even look that bad. I shouldn't say that. If I up the resolution, I'm going to get more particles, and these might kind of go away, which I think I will do. But the internal pressure is actually a little high. I'm going to turn that down and up the resolution, and then I'll meet back with you guys after it simulates a little bit. Okay, so we're back, and here's our simulated liquid. 10 resolution, change the internal pressure down a little bit. You know, it's not perfect. We can mess around with this a lot more if we wanted, but I think that's pretty good for now. One more thing in RealFlow. Say you have an emitter. I'm going to go ahead and, yeah, if you have an emitter that is putting out liquid and it's going all over the place, and you don't want just a random particle, floating down here, coming out of the emitter, you can add a volume around your object, and I'll do that right now. Just go down to Demons, Volume, and throw it around like your work area. Go to Scale here, and it'll get rid of any particles that happen to fly out of the emitter that you don't want. So say my cereal bowl puts some liquid on top that goes over the bowl, over the lip of the bowl. It'll fall to here, fall, and then boom, once it hits this, it disappears, which is good to know because you don't want, just random liquid flying all over the place. So that's a volume. But besides that, I like the result, and this is where we go back to 3D Max or back to Maya, whatever you're doing, and we'll go ahead and import all these files, which is actually going to be a whole bunch of SD files, and we're going to use some of those plugins we used earlier in 3D Max. So go ahead, let's save the scene really quick before we exit out. Go ahead, save project, and yeah, let's open up that 3D program. This is our final step. Alright, actually there's one more thing we should talk about before we go ahead and open our 3D package. We want to make sure that our SD files, all these objects here, are being saved to our kicks file, our project directory. So to make sure of this, you go to Export, Export Central, and here you go. Objects, all the objects are being saved into a subfolder under the scene directory /objects, so that's going to be a folder. And say you wanted to have more than just the SD file come over, you can change, you can save it as an object too by selecting this, and it'll give you Sphere 11 as an SD file or an object or a soft body particle, etc. And our meshes, go ahead, click meshes, and our meshes are being saved to a folder in the scene directory called meshes. And I'll go ahead and show you that folder really quick on the desktop. Okay, and then so kicks scene directory is kicks /objects. So here are the objects and the SD files and the meshes right here. Alright, so cool. Make sure all your stuff is in your project directory because we're going to use that plugin in our 3D package, and we're nearing the completion of this project. So I'll see you guys in 3D package. Alright. So we have a lot of options right now. We can either open up a blank scene, open up a lighting rig, or say you created an environment already like a kitchen table or whatever. You could open up that project and import your SD file and your meshes into that. Since we didn't really create that earlier, we just created the bowl and the little cereal pieces, I think we should just go ahead and open up a lighting rig that I made. So I'm going to go ahead and open light rig. This step's going to vary for a whole bunch of people. I'm actually going to go into a little bit of a V-Ray tutorial, how to make materials. But if you're using Maya or Cinema 4D or you're not using V-Ray, hang out, learn how to import the SD files to your project, and we'll do that right now. So I'm going to go ahead and delete the sphere, which is at the origin. Okay, so the SD file objects are going to be the sphere 1 through 11. Okay, remember this in the RealFlow file. So we're going to go ahead and import them by using the import SD file import button in the plugin. So go ahead and click that. Okay, look on your desktop serial, click kicks, and then objects right here. Okay, you can click one by one and import them individually, or you can just go ahead and click animation and it drags all these guys in, and I say we do that. So let's click it. Okay, and see how it dropped on the origin right there? Looks good. I'm going to bring down my background here. Okay, so what's next? let's import the liquid. And remember, we saved this liquid as a mesh, so we're gonna have a mesh file coming over. And to open up the mesh file, you have to go to the create bin mesh object. So go ahead and click that. Click kicks for our folder. I have the top view selected. Sometimes if you have like the right view, it'll load sideways, so I always have the top view selected. Go to meshes. Here we go. Here's all 100 frames of it. Click the first one, mesh 100000.bin. Go ahead, open that, and it's going to drop right into our scene. Take a look. Pretty good, right? Okay. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and make some V-Ray materials for this. And I suggest getting V-Ray. It's like one of the best render softwares out there. It's really easy to use, and the results are just amazing. So here's a little quick tutorial. I won't go too in-depth about the materials because I know a lot of you guys aren't going to be using this, and I don't want it to be boring. So let's go ahead, click M for materials. Go ahead, open up the material editor. Okay. Create a blank material. Here we go. Standard, click the V-Ray material right here. That's going to create a new V-Ray material. We'll make the bowl material first. So diffuse is going to be the color. We'll go ahead and make the bowl. We'll make this bowl red. Let's make it red. Okay. Bring it down a little bit. Looks good. Reflection. If you change this value to white, it's going to be more reflective. So just bring it down just a little bit. Okay. And just drag and drop onto the bowl. Looks good. Let's create the milk material. Standard V-Ray material. Color, white. Probably the diffuse is probably going to be white. Alright. And reflection, we'll leave, we'll have a little reflection. So bring it down just a tad bit. There we go, 2. Drag it onto your mesh. Let's create those serial particles. So this is going to be a little more in depth for the serial particle, a little more difficult. Go ahead, click standard V-Ray material, just like we were doing before. Actually, don't worry about the color yet. Go to maps right here. It's going to open up all like the diffuse to reflect the opacity map. What we want is a displace map because we want the serial to not be perfectly round. So we're going to throw a little displacement on there. So go ahead, click none. Then you have all these options. Go ahead and click smoke. Yeah. Okay, smoke. And see how that adds a little like ripple to it, which is going to be good because the kick serial is not going to be perfectly round. And then let's go ahead and add a color to it, a diffuse map. Click that smoke again. Okay, and then click color. The first color should probably be like a light tannish color. Okay, and then the next color should be, I don't know, a little darker probably. Alright, and this is what our material looks like right now. You can see how it's very ripply and it's got like those little spots of darker color, which looks pretty good. So let's go ahead and apply these to all of the serial particles. So select by name. Our serial particles are named sphere 2 through 11. So once this pops up, I'll select all of those. If it ever does pop up. Okay. Here we go. Apply to selection. Looks good. Let's orient our camera. Alright, twist it just a little bit. And let's go ahead and render and see what happens. So render, or you could have clicked F10, but I just went to render. I have a whole bunch of settings already, but you can go online and find a tutorial on these settings. If I went through all of them, it'd probably take another half hour. So just go online, look at the V-Ray settings. Okay, go ahead, and I'm going to pause this and we'll see what the final product looks like. Alright, and here's our final product. Looks pretty good. And that is in a nutshell how we created that scene earlier. I just had a lighting rig, and I imported my 2 objects here, the serial pieces and the bowl. Then I had the mesh in there. Like I said, you could do a more complex scene, but you're going to be importing the SD files back into that scene. And that's going to be it for this tutorial. My name's Eric Schilling. I hope you learned a lot, and I'll try and answer the questions below in the comment section. And yeah, I'll see you guys later. Peace.